Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today grew up in Virginia, and most of her stories are set in the Blue Ridge Mountains, but her debut novel, South of Heaven, takes place in the North Carolina Sandhills, where her family's roots run deep. After graduating from Virginia Tech with a degree in horticulture, she was fortunate to cultivate a career in television production and marketing in Chattanooga, the University of North Carolina Center for Public Media, and South Carolina Educational Television. My guest holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of Memphis. She, her husband Lee, and their Springer Spaniel Maggie are now settled in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where nothing could be finer. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Patti Meredith.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you for what you do.
Patti, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
That's a great question. And people ask me, they say, how long did it take you to write this book? And I say, my whole life. It's I just enjoyed the writing. I got started, I guess in my 30s. I was always writing, and then taking classes and working on things. And I started another novel that's never been published and never will be published, but that taught me a lot. And then I worked in television when I was in Chattanooga, and that was fun. But that's that's all you do. That was a lot. And so that when I married my husband and we moved to Chapel Hill, I was so surrounded by North Carolina writers and Southern writers and my heroes. And I got a job at University of North Carolina Public Television, and for a show called North Carolina People. And Mr. Friday interviewed authors and that was just heaven. I remember Fred Chappell. I was walking him up the long hallway from the studio back to the lobby, and I got my courage up and I said, Mr. Chappell, that was great. I said, what can you tell me? What's the secret? And he said, well, writing's like plowing. It's one with a mule, one row at a time. So I plowed a lot of rows for a lot of years. And I started this novel, and then, we would move. My husband's job was in commercial television, and we moved a lot. And so I was always moving house and getting settled and doing this and that or the other. But the weird thing is that I stuck with these people. My imaginary people would not shut up, and I stuck with them. And I'm not the kind of person who sticks with anything like, a diet or exercise or any of that. But these people stuck with me, and I just, life gets in. You have life things that happen, your parents, and we never had children. So I think I really admire people who write and have big families. And so I guess the answer to the question, what took me so long? Confidence, lack of confidence, direction. I will say, when we moved to North Carolina, the first time. And I took a class at Duke Continuing Education with Georgianne Eubanks. And that was 1991. And Georgianne walked in and she had a big whiteboard in the Bishop House there on Duke campus. And she wrote on there, "Discipline is remembering what you want." And I have it typed over here and taped on the wall by my desk. Discipline is remembering what you want. And so for, 20 some years, I remembered what I wanted. It just took a while for me to have the confidence to really go for it. And if it hadn't been for the pandemic, I don't think I would have finished it. I mean, it's like that's when things shut down. You couldn't go to lunch, you couldn't have company, you couldn't travel. And my brain got more, still, where I could kind of hear the whole story for a long period of time. And so that's what finally pushed me right over the edge, the good edge.
Well, I hear so many people who said that the pandemic was great for them. And I hear so many people said they couldn't write a single word. So I'm glad that it was good for you. And, I also hear that that these theses for MFAs become first novels. I hear that from a lot of authors that MFAs are fertile grounds for getting that first book completed. But yours was not a quick journey. Just writing that thesis did not complete your journey. So you spent a lot of years on that book.
I did. And when I turned in my thesis at the University of Memphis, when we lived in Memphis, 2011, I get years so confused. So don't anybody do the math. But when I turned that thesis in, it was in the novel was in first person. The chapters were first person. I have 3 characters that have voices, point of views, Fern, Dean, and Leona. And each chapter would be a first person perspective from them. And so my thesis committee, Carrie Holiday, Sonia Livingston, and they were like, would you need to try this in close third? And it was a really good thing to hear, but I don't regret that it was in first person, because that really gave me the voices of the characters and their perspectives. And so when I did the revision with close third, and Julia, I have no idea how many drafts of this novel I have. I mean, I have no idea, because I would get distracted and I wouldn't touch it for like months and months, and so then I'd go back to it, and I think that kind of helped it. So I don't know. Yeah. The MFA was great though, because it did give me focus and great instruction and deadlines. Deadlines are work for me. That's a good thing.
Me too. I need a deadline. I really do. That really pushes me. And I think first person causes us to live in those characters' skins. So I think that was very beneficial to your work. But I like close third because the camera pulls out, and you can really see more of the story surrounding them. So I do write in close third.
I like it too.
You've lived all over the Southeast, which is a writer's paradise and where great stories grow. How did the South and the people who lived there influence your writing?
It was fun because I grew up in Virginia, but my family was from North Carolina, and so the North Carolina writers, the Lee Smith, Jill McCorkle, Clyde Edgerton, Reynolds Price, all those great people. When you live somewhere and that's the only place you live, that's your universe. And I mean, I remember being surprised when I realized that everybody in the country didn't have Virginia history in 7th grade. But anyway, so moving, I'd go to when I got to Tennessee and Chattanooga after college, it was like, oh my God, all the great Tennessee writers. And so I was influenced by people from Louisiana, and then in Tennessee, and then of course being close to Mississippi, that was incredible, and just to to realize that every state, every region has these revered writers that bring so much to the Southern writing. And Memphis was rich. That was a very rich area to live in as far as like the writing and the history, and just I guess the living all over has been good too, because everywhere we moved, I was in search of other writers and in search of workshops, and that was a wonderful thing. I went to the Appalachian workshop in Kentucky, and that was really, it was the Appalachian Writers Workshop in Hyman, Kentucky. Lee Smith was there, Silas House, and that's where the first scene of the novel came to me. I'd written a short story to present there, and it was early days. Okay, so so I had this line in the short story that didn't really make any sense. And Lee Smith wrote in the manuscript, she wrote, "That's just odd." And so when it came time that evening when you're supposed to present to the group, I thought, I cannot read that story. And so I was flipping through my notebook in the afternoon, and I found this scene where there's a young man who's remembering how he used to play in a bamboo patch, and he would pretend that he found his father who was missing in Vietnam. This was something he did a lot. He'd go in the bamboo and he'd pretend like he was a soldier and he found his dad who'd been missing for his whole life. And that was Dean. And Dean's voice came to me for that scene. And so I read it that night and I got good. Nobody said it was odd. So that's kind of where the story started. So, and the other thing about moving around a lot is I think you see a place better when you have some distance from it. I know that when I was living in Memphis, I couldn't write about Memphis, or when I was living in Galax, I couldn't write about Galax. So it's like you need a little, for me, it helped to have a little distance for it.
Well, I think that's the same as we were talking about with third person. I think you need a little distance. I could have written my first book as a memoir, but I didn't want to be that close. I wanted to turn it into fiction. So I used a lot of, actual events, but I wove them into the fiction. And I think that just took me a little farther away from the story and not so much my personal story there.
That's hard sometimes, because it's the closer you are to writing something that's true, the more bound you are to that, and it's really hard to let that go. That's why setting the novel in Carthage, where my grandmothers grew up and where I never lived, but Carthage became kind of a little mythical area to me. So and then when I started doing book clubs and readings down in Carthage, I was like, okay, I know that's not where the funeral home is. Sorry about the name. I know that's not a real church, but people were really nice about it though.
We have a Carthage, Mississippi as well.
Yeah. Is there a Carthage, Texas? It seems like.
I'm sure there is. I have only lived here 7 years, and there are lots of towns in Texas that I don't recognize. Once you wrote the book, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to choose a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
For many, many years before the novel, in hindsight, before the novel was really ready, I sent out all those query letters. You know how you go and you figure out who's agents who, and you get those addresses and you write those letters, dear Mr. Mrs. So-and-so. And that was soul crunching. I had one woman who was interested, but then that didn't work out. And then I didn't, that's all we knew for a long time was the traditional route. And so that was another thing, I guess, that kept me writing, because it wasn't getting accepted. And so I just kept working on it and thinking about it and just being with it. And then when we moved from Baton Rouge back here, there are wonderful presses, small presses that I have a lot of respect for. And I think I want to just say this too to people who are watching this, who are or listening to this, who are writers. Free yourself up from the way you think it has to be. And ask yourself, why are you doing this? Why are you writing? Is it because you want to, talk to somebody on the phone from New York? Maybe not. It's like, why are you doing this? What's important? The story's important. Getting it out there is important. Your characters are important. And so during the pandemic, I was sitting in here by myself, kind of just working, writing, doing whatever, figuring out how I could get out of cooking dinner one more night, that. And I saw on Facebook that a small press, Main Street Rag, Mint Hill Books in Charlotte was accepting manuscripts. And I'd had friends, Denton Loving and Sue Dunlop, who had published poetry books with Scott Douglas at Main Street Rag. And so I called them both and I was like, should I send these, should I send my book to him to look at? Should I, and they were like, yeah, do it. It's good. And so I did. And then I got an email back from Scott that said he was interested. And then he sent the contract back. And he's a very small press. He's a one-man band. He does it for the love. And it's amazing what he does with the books. He takes your book, your manuscript. I hired my own editor because I don't spell well. You can probably tell from listening to me talk that my grammar is not great. It's like, so I hired my own editor and to feel good about it. And I'd had good readers, Darnell Arnott, a good friend of mine and writer, had read it, and Denton Loving had read it. Sue had read it. So, but just to get that final read, and so Laurel Farrajohn read it as an editor. And so it was not what I thought was the way it was going to be, but it worked out in a great way. I sent the manuscript to Scott, then we started talking about the cover, and it kind of became I like to call it a small batch special thing. And I really like that my North Carolina book was published by a North Carolina publisher. And so I really encourage people to not say no, to check out the small presses, because it was a fun experience. And so this cover, I found a picture of an emu on one of those websites that where that you just pay $30 for the picture. And so I found this emu, and then I put his picture in my phone and did this watercolor app. And Scott was kind to me. He had designed a cover too, but he was very nice about it. He was like, oh, okay. So, my husband and Darnell and Denton Loving on the phone, we kind of came up with this, and that was fun. It was just a really
It's a very striking cover.
Thank you. That was kind of Darnell and Denton's idea. They were like, show one eye. But yeah, the small presses, I have friends who've had great success with the Amazon publishing. My book is not on Ingram. Like if you go to a bookstore in Fredericksburg and you want to order it, it's not going to happen. It's on Amazon, and I've got it in local regional bookstores around North Carolina. But if someone orders it on Amazon, I go into the hallway out here and get a book and put it in an envelope and mail it to them. So it's a very close process.
Well, I do love the small presses. I'm published both my books through a small press, and I just wanted a partner in the process. And
Yes.
and authors have so many choices these days, and self-publishing is not the same animal that it once was. It's a much more professional process, and many of those books and most of those books look as professional as the Big Five books. And I think people think that if they go with one of the big five publishers, that they're going to have everything done for them, but that's not the case anymore. And our
No.
challenges are the same, whether they're a small press or the big five. We especially, all authors, even with the big five, have to do our own publicity. So I'm asking you, what have you done post publication to promote your book?
Oh, I don't think I would have sold any if it hadn't been for Facebook. Scott put out the call after he got it together for pre-orders. That's how he funds it, how he makes his money. And so I put that on Facebook, and it's hard. You're like, hey, it's my book. Would you buy my book? You feel bad, but oh my God, I have the best friends in the whole world. I mean, that's a big thing that I'm lesson and blessing for this book. I have the best friends ever, and we live so many places. I had a lot of them. And so through Facebook, I put the pre-order stuff in that, and people supported that. And then, I feel like sometimes I'll look back and think, oh, you didn't do it very good. You should have done this, you should have done that. But you really have to do what you can do at the time and move on. I love book clubs. Book clubs are my jam. And I had one on Monday morning in Durham here. A good friend of mine had the people, and that's tough too, because you don't want, because your friends, you're like, they're in book clubs, and you know that they're reading like Ann Patchett and and the big books, and you don't want to say, could you, because so I don't do that. But if they offer, it's like good. But I went to this book club. Bobby Steigner had made all the food from the book. She had on her beautiful table. The women read their favorite passages back to me, and I was in tears at 10 o'clock in the morning. It was just, I mean, there's nothing like having people accept your imaginary people as real people and talk about them like their neighbors.
It really is a blessing.
Um,
And because of the pandemic, I didn't even know Zoom existed until the pandemic. And now we can Zoom into book clubs all around the world. I've
yeah.
talked to book clubs, in many foreign countries, and tried to explain, the differences in our American culture and traditions in the South. And, it's just been a great joy to do that. When a stranger, not a friend, not a family member, finds your book and wants to read it in their book club, it really is so affirming.
It is. And that's another thing to people, if you're watching and you're over 50 and you're thinking about what to do it, because it frees your imaginary people, and they deserve to be out in the world. But
And you
that's
get to be a celebrity for the time, that you were in the book club, because I've been in a book club that's been in existence for 30 years, and they never had an author come to meet with them until they chose my book, and I met with them as the author. So, I mean, book clubs are just hungry for having those authors that they love, and the books that they love come to visit with them.
Well, it's really fun. It's really, really, in library book clubs. That's been a real blessing. I have a huge new renewed appreciation for what libraries do. But that's been really fun and encouraging.
Yeah. Well, Patti, tell us a little bit about the passage that you've brought to share today, and then read from your book so we can hear your tone and voice.
Okay. So, like I was saying, the book is told in three voices: two sisters, Fern and Leona, and then Fern's son Dean. And so I'll just read the beginning of it. It's set in Carthage, North Carolina, in 1998. And so I'll start reading I'll read a little bit of Fern, and then I'll read a little bit of Dean. Fern. Time lingered more than passed in the sandhills of North Carolina, where no ancient mountains or ocean tides marked the days. The sandhills lay low, midway between. Flatland, where in summer acres of blankleaf tobacco flourished in spite of its fall from grace. A Venetian blind sagged over the front window of the Citizen-Times. Fern McQueen was careful with the tattered foil. Every morning she expected the string to unravel in her hand. Across the way on the courthouse lawn, her son sat on a granite bench tucked beneath a white oak, a memorial to her husband Mac, missing in action since the Vietnam War. Dean visited the bench most mornings before clocking in at Frank's garage. "We talk, Mama," he said, "in my head." Fern had tried to dissuade her son from telling people about these talks, knowing it only brought about more pity from the town of Carthage. But Dean was Dean. Her boy had no secrets. Fern had never held out hope Mac would be found alive. She'd known he was gone, maybe even before the earnest men in stiff uniforms said, "missing in action." That was 26 years ago. A woman whose husband had been lost on the same mission recently sent Fern a letter claiming to know about an evacuation site in Laos. She said news would be coming soon. Fern had gotten other letters through the years from groups asking her to sign petitions, join their efforts. She never had. Fern believed Mac going missing was a misery dealt by the hand of God, a misery she'd brought upon herself. She'd thrown all the letters away. With the dogwoods declaring spring, tired Christmas lights still dangled from worn cords along the flat roof line of the Moore County Courthouse. The lights remained year-round, being too much trouble to take down and put back up. Surely the strands had been replaced, but in Fern's mind they were the same ones that glowed red and green years ago on that snowy December night that changed everything. So Fern has lived in this town all her life and never left. And so all of her memories, all of her mistakes are just right outside the window where she can see them. And so then I'll go over here to Dean, who she talked about. Dean parked in front of the courthouse across from the newspaper office where his mother worked and walked over to the speckled granite bench. The deep-cut letters on the seat read, "Sergeant Michael Dean Mac McQueen, never forgotten, MIA." His daddy was proud of the bench. Dean knew that because ever since he was a boy, he'd talked to his daddy, and his daddy talked back. Not out loud, but in Dean's head. He heard his daddy clear as could be. He told Dean things like how to swing a bat, how to tell if a carburetor was beyond fixing, or how many peaches it took to make the best homemade ice cream. But his daddy never would talk about where he was. Dean had asked him 1,000 times, "Are you dead? In heaven? Or are you still over there somewhere?" But his daddy never would say. His mama told him not to tell folks that he and his daddy talked. But when somebody asked how come him to sit so long on the hard bench, Dean told them the truth. He'd never lied in his life. The way things were the way things were. His mama said people didn't understand, but Dean told her that was their problem, not his. Some folks beat all, like the ones who came into the garage claiming their tires had been put on wrong, swearing they hadn't run over something. Some folks lied when the truth would be better. His friend Brandy didn't cotton to a lie either. She took Dean to the movies over in Southern Pines in her Dodge because she didn't fit good in his Jeep. Every Friday night they'd go to the Dairy Queen for banana splits and tell each other the truth. Last Friday she'd been the one to start. Hearty hamburgers are not the biggest hamburgers in the world. Then Dean said, spark plugs for a 93 Chrysler didn't cost Mr. Frank $10 apiece. They'd keep on until a week's worth of lies got straight. Having the truth told settled Dean's troubled mind. Dean stretched out on the granite bench beside the courthouse and made a pillow for his head with folded hands. The chill from the stone ran down his back, but the sun warmed his face. He bent his knees and scrunched himself up to vent the slab. He stared up at the white oak, tall as the courthouse. A breeze caused the curled brown leaves to shake like they had a bad case of nerves. Dean had studied the leafy branches all winter long. Other trees went bare, but not the old oak. Dean imagined it saying, hell with spring, I'm hanging on to what I got. But there wouldn't be room for the dead when the new buds rose. Dean felt bad for the crinkled old things that had stuck it out through the winter, wind and rain. It didn't seem right to make it through all that just to be pushed to the ground. He closed his eyes and waited for his head to get still. It took quiet for him to hear his daddy's voice. Hey, son. Hey, Daddy. Aunt Leona's coming down here. What for? Beats me. Well, don't let her be ugly to you. I'm staying the hell out of her way. You going to Pittsburgh? Yep. Well, it's not easy being a businessman. I can handle it. I know you can. A car horn blew. His daddy stopped talking. The oak leaves scratched against one another. Dean sat up and wiped his nose on his t-shirt sleeve. The sun had inched higher in the sky and his watch said 10:15. He rubbed his fingers across his daddy's name like he always did before he left him. So we've got Dean, who goes to the memorial bench and talks to his dad that he never knew. And we have Fern, who has a secret. She has a big secret. That's kind of what the book's about. It's kind of about keeping secrets and kind of how they just manifest in shame and everything else. So that's it.
Those are great characters, and your descriptions are just wonderful.
You're very sweet. I appreciate you saying that, because sometimes I feel like I could write dialogue all day long, but I forget to tell people where they are.
No, it's very descriptive. You had me right there.
Good. Thank you.
What does writing success look like to you personally?
I want to get better. I went to a little literary festival up in the mountains the other week, and they were kind enough to invite me and to read, and I had a wonderful time. Again, people were very open to the characters and very encouraging. But when I was there, I got to go to a workshop from another writer who was there, David Joy, who is just an amazing North Carolina writer. He's young. He's incredible. He reminds me, he's kind of Larry Brown. He writes the truth and of the times. But I got to go to a workshop that he gave that night on writing, and that's the thing. Just success is just getting better and figuring things out more. How to get those sentences better and clearer. How to make it more interesting, how to bring the readers into it, and how to get the story told, and just giving these imaginary people voices. So I don't have really big dreams. Of course I do. I daydream about Oprah all the time, but it's but I think that's another great thing about being over 50. It's like I'm very happy to be in North Carolina, to have book clubs, to have an opportunity to go to workshops to get better. I'm doing short stories. If anybody's out there and they're writing short stories, I highly recommend you send your work to Salvation South. It's a new website that's wonderful. Anyway, but so I don't know. Success. I'm happy. I guess that's success, right?
It's very much success.
Being content with
Yes.
what it is. It's great.
Do you have any other books in you?
I swear, I know this is a bad idea, but I kind of want to work on a sequel. I have scenes. I had knee surgery last year, and I had this vision of how I would just, like, after my knee surgery, I would start working on the sequel. I didn't realize that knee surgery was going to be quite as intense as it was. So no sequels were complete, but I've thought of that. I have another book that's totally different. That's kind of rom-com-ish, about a young chef who goes to compete in a contest in Italy, and that's just kind of fun. But I'm working on short stories right now to get some of those right, and I would like to do a collection of that. That'd be cool. Maybe if you change this to authors over 80, check me out.
I'm interviewing people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they're still turning out beautiful work. So that can be you.
Good. I couldn't have done it earlier. I couldn't have done it.
That's what everybody says. We had to have lived the life and the experiences that we had to be able to make our work so rich.
And I don't think I would have been this content earlier with this, with what I'm doing. I would have thought, oh, that's not, I should be doing this. Da, 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 da. But and so the confidence and everything, I couldn't have done it. It wouldn't have been a pleasant situation.
Well, they say to start earning any serious money that we have to have series. So I think you're on the right track if you're going to have a sequel or maybe even two.
Girl, I'm a money repellent. My poor husband, anytime I talk about writing, he's like, how much is this going to cost me?
It sounds like my husband. He says, do you ever think you're going to earn out, everything you've spent? And I'll say, oh, no. Not if you count everything. No. Because I do love writing retreats and conferences and all of that.
I know.
Yeah.
I do too. It's a good habit.
Well, I think writing is something we can do the rest of our lives. It's kind of like swimming, and I think we just get better and better, as you go along. And short story collections are becoming more acceptable than they were at one time. They were hard to sell at one time, and poetry was the same thing. It kind of went out of favor, and now it's very popular again with the young people.
Isn't that something? I do love good short stories. I really do. Lisa Cupola just put out a wonderful one, Have Mercy on Us. That's just an incredible collection. But I enjoy short stories. And I've told people too, I was like, if I do write a sequel, I think I'll just put it up on my website and tell y'all where it is. If you care about what's happening with Dean and them, I'll just like throw you a chapter every now and then.
Well, that's popular too, to spin them out like the old radio series, and people are waiting anxiously for the next edition.
Yeah, I do have. Okay, what's the Texas woman, Colleen
Hoover?
Holy mackerel! I mean, I really admire her so much. I'd love to go to a read. I'd love to meet her.
Yes, one of my book clubs just said she's a little too erotic for those of us in this age group, but she is a real phenomena, and TikTok has been her friend.
Who would have thought? I mean, I don't know. It's just, but again, there's so many ways. There's so many new ways. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, Patti, it's been a great visit. And as always, our last interview question is, our writers over 50 are quite unique. Do you have advice for writers 50 and above?
Don't give up and open yourself to be open to new ways, the new ways of publishing, the new ways of doing. And the main thing is enjoy writing and enjoy it. I mean, it's like, I don't know. That's the main thing. I think that's the thing that I'm getting back to now. It's like, because I got so caught up in how do I get this book out? What do I do? And then it dawned on me, well, you're not writing, and that's not fun. So it's about the writing. It's not about anything else. But don't give up. Keep doing it. Enjoy yourself. Be proud of yourself for doing it, because it's really hard. So, and yell at me if I can help you in any other way. So you can find me. I'm just sitting here in North Carolina. I'm open.
Well, you're very gracious and generous, and have a wonderful community there to surround you. And just hearing your accent today has swept me right back home. So I appreciate you being here with me. And now we can count you among our authors over 50.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And again, thanks for what you do.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.